Hi there, Ranger Master here, and today I'm going to be reading a book to you about Biddy Mason and her experience here in the Santa Monica Mountains. As we discover what freedom means to Biddy, I ask, what does freedom mean to you? Biddy Mason Speaks Up by Arisa White and Laura Atkins. Illustrations by Laura Freeman. Reading permission by Heyday. Bridget Biddy Mason was born in Hancock County, Georgia in 1818, where she was enslaved. Biddy was forced to move when she became the property of Robert and Rebecca Smith. No one today knows why or how. Sometime in the 1840s, the Smiths moved Biddy and her daughters to Tishomingo County, Mississippi, to live on their tenant farm. Eventually, the Smiths bought Hannah, who had been enslaved in Rebecca's childhood household. Biddy's life in the Smiths' two-roomed cabin would have been different from her experience on a larger slave plantation. With fewer people to help on a tenant farm, Biddy would have had more responsibilities. In addition to laboring in the field, she would have cleared the land and done various household chores like cooking and laundering clothes. Robert and Rebecca Smith, who were members of the Mormon Church, eventually decided to move to what was then called Great Salt Lake City, in what would become the state of Utah. Biddy, Hannah, and their 7 children were forced to go west with the Smiths in a wagon train of 90 people, 34 of them enslaved. In addition to serving the Smiths, Biddy had to take care of her own young children while also tending to the livestock. Biddy, Hannah, their children, and the Smiths covered nearly 1,000 more miles as the wagon train moved from winter quarters to Great Salt Lake City. The last 100 miles were the hardest, with mountains to climb and little grass for cattle to eat. They arrived at Great Salt Lake City in October 1848. What are the migration stories of your family? In 1851, 437 members of the Great Salt Lake community, including 26 Black people, arrived in what is now San Bernardino, home to the Serrano and Cahuilla peoples, and forcibly established a new Mormon colony or settlement. Biddy, Hannah, and their children were part of the group, as was Hannah's enslaved partner, Toby Embers, who was also the father of Hannah's 5th child, Charles. They all had to endure the long journey, walking for miles and looking after livestock, even in the punishing desert. Biddy and her family arrived in San Bernardino, where Robert Smith established a successful cattle ranch. He would have known that slavery was illegal in California, but he continued to hold Biddy, Hannah, and their children captive for 4 years. After Mormon leaders took over his ranch because it was so successful, Robert Smith decided to move everyone to Texas, where slavery was legal. Some sources say that Biddy told Charles Owens and Lizzie Rowan they were leaving. Even though she and her children legally should have been free, Biddy didn't have the power to challenge Robert Smith on her own. In late December, Biddy, Hannah, and their 10 children, the Smiths and their 7 children, and some hired trail hands moved to the Santa Monica Hills. The night they camped out in 1855, it was a freezing 33 degrees. The coldest we have ever experienced, a church clerk in San Bernardino reported. Even though Biddy was legally free, she had to rely on her community to support her in resisting Robert Smith and the institution of slavery. In late December, Sheriff Clift and Sheriff Alexander asked Judge Benjamin Hayes to sign a writ of habeas corpus. Biddy, Hannah, and their children were being taken to a state where they would not be free. which was a form of unfair imprisonment. Robert Smith had to go to court to say why it was just to take them to Texas. The sheriff's wagons took Biddy, Hannah, and their 10 children to the county jail on Spring and Franklin streets, behind the Los Angeles courthouse. Then, on January 1, 1856, Judge Hayes called Robert Smith to his chambers to respond to the charges. Smith said that Biddy and Hannah left Mississippi with their own consent, rather than remain there, and that he has supported them ever since, subjecting them to no greater control than his own children, and not holding them as slaves. The way Smith explained it, Biddy, Hannah, and their children were family to him, not enslaved, and they were freely choosing to go with the Smiths to Texas. Judge Hayes had to figure out the truth. On January 15th, Biddy's lawyer didn't appear. Because she was not white, Biddy could not speak directly in court against a white person. Smith's lawyer demanded that the case be stopped. Instead, Judge Hayes made the decision to call Biddy, Hannah, and their eldest children into his chambers. Judge Hayes later wrote a newspaper article about the trial. He wrote down what he said were Biddy's answers, but not his questions. He said he explained to Biddy that if she wanted to go to Texas, she could not take her children. The children would be unjustly imprisoned in a slave state. The answer he wrote from her was clear. I do not wish to be separated from my children, and do not, in such case, wish to go. How can you speak up when you are afraid or feel like you don't have power? Biddy's responses helped him to make his ruling that legally freed Biddy, Hannah, and their children. When Biddy bravely spoke up for herself and her children, her actions impacted the larger struggle for African American rights. At 37 years old, Biddy was legally free. It was truly a victory when Judge Hayes declared at the end of the trial that she and the others were free to become settled and go to work for themselves in peace and without fear. Biddy worked hard as a midwife, going on to deliver hundreds of babies throughout the city. She carried her black nursing bag and her freedom papers wherever she went. It was necessary to keep her freedom papers with her at all times because free black people could be kidnapped and sold back into slavery. Around this time, Biddy started going by the last name Mason. As a healer and midwife, Biddy built a successful career and helped strengthen the culturally diverse community of Los Angeles. How has your family worked to create a better life? 3 years after winning her court case, Biddy was hired by Dr. John Strother Griffin to work as a doctor's assistant. She worked for his private practice for $2.50 per day, which is worth about $70 today. Biddy also continued to run her own midwife and nursing practice. She was known to heal people in the poorer areas of the city and also people imprisoned in the city jails. Over the next 10 years, Biddy carefully saved the money she earned. At 48 years old, she was one of the first women to buy land in Los Angeles. For $250, she bought a parcel on Spring Street between 3rd and 4th Streets, which at the time was on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Biddy became the proud owner of her own homestead. She saw this as a legacy for her children and grandchildren. What does home mean to you? Los Angeles continued to grow over the years, and in the 1880s, Biddy found that her homestead was in the heart of downtown. Biddy was able to sell part of the land for $1,500, 6 times more than what she had originally paid. Biddy went on to buy more land, becoming one of the wealthiest people in the city. She deeply believed in helping others, from her family to institutions that served the larger community. She remained an independent single mother, head of her household, and leader in Los Angeles. Biddy was known to have said, "If you hold your hand closed, nothing good can come in. The open hand is blessed, for it gives in abundance, even as it receives." These words speak to why Biddy became a philanthropist. She used her money and time to help others. In 1872, Biddy was one of the founders of the First African Methodist Episcopal Church. They held the first meetings in her home, and she helped to pay the church's taxes and the minister's salary. Biddy also founded and worked in the city's first day nursery for children in Los Angeles, in which caregivers looked after children while their parents, especially their mothers, went to work. In 1884, major floods in Los Angeles destroyed many homes. Biddy opened an account at a grocery store for people of any background who were displaced. She paid for their food and supplies. Biddy's home at 331 Spring Street became a refuge to many in need. People heard about her generosity and came from far away to ask for her help. By 1890, Spring Street between 4th and 7th had become the financial center of Los Angeles, a city of over 50,000 people that included 1,258 African Americans. Biddy had a fortune worth $300,000, which would be more than $7.5 million today. She died on January 15, 1891, at the age of 73. How can you tend to your community's well-being? The story of Biddy Mason's fight for civil rights includes her connection to a bigger community. Together, they created a fair United States for all Americans, which encourages us to speak up, just as Biddy did. How can you open your heart and hand to help your community? Let us know in the comments below. I'll see you in the Santa Monica Mountains. Until next time.